uppercut, try to hit me in the gut, thinking that I won't react. You whispering my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a buzz. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a buzz. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home. Begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet. My legend's written in the stone, yeah. You're crying Adrian, defeat is now your only friend. Even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a buzz. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a buzz. Oh, 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 First round, fifth round, final round. Oh, yeah. First round, fifth round, final round. No, 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 no. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a buzz. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a buzz. Oh, oh,
Dear friends, Operator Starsky here, and this is In Time.
Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to In Time. Oh, and we got, oh, yep, all the cameras are up. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. We have got a great show for you today. We are going to be discussing independent news and media, which we're all involved in one way or another. I do apologize for 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐴𝐿𝐴𝐿𝐴𝐿𝐴𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿 only had 4 cameras available. Sorry, Azandering. It's nothing personal. I mean, I would have done it to you anyway, but
I am the ghost in the machine.
So we've already got Dunk on You, $20. How many more stupid things can Trump say? Slava, you don't put your head in the lion's mouth, please, really. How many days are there in a year? I mean, How many miles must
Hours of the day.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be a lot. How many days are left? Oh dear. UTV and Ham gifted 1 membership. Thank you so much, UTV and Ham, and Dunk on You. Both of you have been supporters for a long time, and we really do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Sinister Porpoise, $2. Really surprised not to find that $2.56. Something must have happened there. Why did we reelect Handsome Jack as president? Handsome Jack. I'm not even going to explain that one. Merc knows. Merc knows exactly who that is.
Yeah, more like Simple Jack.
Yeah. Oh wow. So and Dunk on You just gifted 5 Independent News in Time membership. So thank you for that. So today our guests are Mercado and Dylan Burns, and thank you guys so much for joining us. You both have your own YouTube channels. The links are in the description. And Merc, we've had you on before, so we know that the way you became a YouTuber was you have shitty friends.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep. I got sent off. That's fair.
But you got to cover Rittenhouse. I mean, you were there for that. That's insane. Yep. Which is going to beg the question about going places. I at one point was tempted to go to Ukraine, almost went. I know you've gone. So Dylan, how about you? What's your story? How did you get into giving your opinion on YouTube and covering news so that other people can learn something? Oh, you are muted.
We can't hear you, Dylan. We need to hear your lore.
There we go. That should fix it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Is it at the right mic? Let me make sure it is. Yes, it is. Okay. So I got involved in online content creation back in 2020, right after, right as the 2020 election was going on. So, Trump was still president, and it was a very, very political age. And I went on a few content creator shows to talk about, just foreign policy mostly. I remember the issue was Hong Kong, and I think it was Bolivia, because there was the, Evo Morales was ousted out of power temporarily, and there was a lot of talk online. And I was very interested in foreign policy at the time. I had gone to the University of Maryland to take some classes in international relations, and I spent my time in school mostly studying the Syrian civil war. The Syrian civil war was very interesting because due to everybody having a cell phone, it was one of the first wars where everybody was constantly giving you live updates, completely unfiltered, that no government could stop you from looking at, where you could see the entire country transforming in real time, from everyday Syrians just filming tanks and like different rocket attacks. And oh my God, there's a sneak attack that would have been a sneak attack if it wasn't documented by this random person in the village who just so happened to have a Nokia, So I was very interested in it, got interested in foreign policy, started getting interested in local campaigns. And eventually I started my own show after there was enough interest after going on other shows. When the invasion happened, and I was doing mostly just like local political work because I was interested in Maryland politics, born and raised there, go Commanders, Rookie of the Year. But at the start of the invasion, I was given the impression that Ukraine was never going to get invaded by a lot of the people on the internet, because it had a lot of people who called themselves experts in the field of international relations, but specifically experts in analyzing the conflict. People who have big voices online, like John Mearsheimer. But the thing that got me wasn't that they just got it wrong about Ukraine getting invaded. Like, crazy things happen in history. People get things wrong. It was the follow-up. It was they got it wrong, and then they got what would happen after wrong if they did invade it. Because it wasn't just that Ukraine isn't going to get invaded. Well, now that they are, obviously Ukraine's going to fall in 3 to 4 weeks. And then they didn't. And so once all of the expertise kind of shattered, and it's not all the experts, because there were people like Ben, who was training Ukrainian troops, that talked about the resolve, and it wasn't like nobody had the expertise, but I think people had generally accepted the Russian-centric viewpoint that they're the second most powerful country in the world. That Ukrainian is kind of sounds a lot like Russia. I mean, what's the real difference at the end of the day? Who's going to go out there and kill themselves for like a few vowel differences? I don't know. What's the difference anyway? And so I think a lot of people predatorily took advantage of people's lack of expertise to primarily show the Russian-centric viewpoint while deprioritizing Ukrainian voices about their own country. And so once that wave kind of hit me and people were watching me cover the start of the war with enough interest and I made enough money, I decided I wanted to improve my coverage. And so I went to Ukraine, got a contract with, a press card with the Ministry of Defense. And I started embedding with the Ukrainian military because I thought that the only way that you'll know what's really going to happen is to go take a look at it yourself, because the so-called experts got it wrong.
And by the way, let me also, before we continue, let both my co-hosts know if either of you guys have any questions, jump in. We've already talked about sort of the direction we're going to go in this, but if you have any questions or anything that you want to know as we're there, let me know. I do want to ask the two of you, since you've been doing this, whether in Ukraine or elsewhere, what's the craziest situation you've ever been in? Has there ever been a time where you're like, okay, what the fuck? I didn't go to journalism. What am I doing here? Who am I to be here?
Go ahead, Dylan.
Do you want to go? You want me to go first?
Do you have yours? I have mine. Do you have yours?
You go first. You go first, because I'm trying to think which one.
I got, because yours. You have a new one every other week now at this point. I'm sure. Yeah, the craziest one for me would be my first stream ever on Facebook, and middle of the riots in Minneapolis, buildings on fire, just chaos, true chaos. And it had to be like 2 a.m. And this video went super viral because it got clipped and it went on Barstool and everything. So I'm walking on the streets of Minneapolis and I'm just like filming. I'm like, oh, about building on fire here, building on fire there. And this porta-john was like tipped over. And like, I was like, what is that? There's like a porta-john on the ground. And like, there was like something was pushing on it. I'm like, what is happening in there right now? Like, what is like, again, porta-john on its side, building behind it on fire, like literally burned. It's like the craziest thing. I'm like, what is happening? And then a hand comes out of this porta-john wall, like not the door, but the wall. Like it broke through like Hulk. I'm like, what is this? What is this? I'm like, and like my chat is like, what the fuck? Like, what are we watching? Because you got to realize it's been hours of like riots, right? And so like we're just like probably all cooked right now. I know I was, and I'm just like, what is that? What is happening? And then like two people came out of it. So there were 2 people in this porta-john, and it was just so crazy to me. And then the hands came out and they crawled out and put it back up. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's crazy. Then I walk around the corner and a transformer immediately blows up, and like the whole power of the part of the Minneapolis like went off. And it was like the craziest sequence in terms of like streaming. Now, obviously, like, I mean, going to Ukraine and taking, fire, like the air defense is going off is crazy, right? And that sucks. But yeah, probably like a direct experience, that porta-john. We call it the porta-john monster. That was probably the craziest like firsthand experience, I'd say.
All right,
That's a good
Dylan?
story.
Yeah. Have you got? Yeah. I must have. I first was sitting there going like, okay, is there a person in there? Did it fall on the door? And they're trying. I honestly, I'm not sure I want to.
The Terminator like hand come out is very dramatic.
It's in the clip. Like it's like boom, and the hand comes out of the door. Like you can go see it. Just type in porta-john monster on the internet. Like type it on Google, and it's on Google.
Everybody needs to do that. Not right now. Yeah. Finish the
later,
show
after the panel.
Yeah. But okay, I'm gonna do that.
It's you'll everything I said, you'll be like, wow, I'm explaining it exactly how it happened. It's just the craziest sequence of events.
Considering what's in a porta-john, I'm surprised you didn't see somebody levitate straight through the side of it.
That's when they stood it up, all the juices like came out of it. That's why. Yeah.
Juices is the worst way you could have described it.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Isandering, for bringing that up. I'm really glad that lovely thought.
You needed to know.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give Dylan another second here because Sinister Porpoise, $5.12. The Hyperion Corporation has filed a lawsuit against In Time for comparing one of their greatest leaders to an incompetent orange buffoon. To be fair, that was him that did that. That was Merc. I had nothing to do with that. I'm loyal to Hyperion until Atlas shows up, and then, what can you do? So Dylan, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by crazy, because like the surrealist experience I've had are just things where like I think I spell it out in a sentence and I'm like, that doesn't feel real. Like my last trip before I left Ukraine, I was in southern Pokrovsk. We were 2 kilometers from the Russians. I was with the drone team. I think it was, I believe it was the 59th, but I honestly cannot remember. But when I was with them underground in this, like, surrounded by all these like expired like jars of stuff that was probably around since like the Stalin era, and if you would open up, you would just pass out, just like because no Ukrainian babushka is gonna ever throw out any food. You're sitting down there and I'm watching this Ukrainian soldier smoke a vape, put on a headset, a Ukrainian uniform covered in Hello Kitty merch as he eliminates Russians in like outhouse toilets. I've never seen a man in Hello Kitty merch kill a man in a toilet. And so like saying that out loud is very surreal, but it's not my craziest experience. My craziest experience, I don't know. There's one. The second, I'm sorry, I don't want to say too much, but when someone says craziest experience, I don't want to, it's hard. I don't want to like put one there and like anoint it. The two that's in my head that's competing for it is a more recent story, which is when me and my friend we were driving back from the front near Kramatorsk, and it was late at night, and since we have accreditation, we can be out at nighttime, but there's no traffic lights because they're trying to preserve electricity because everybody's inside, so why would they have the traffic lights running for no reason? But that means that sometimes, you got to keep your headlights on. At times, you got to be careful. And we had this moment where us in this other car, we almost had like a near collision at an intersection because it was dark, there were no lights, and we didn't see anything. And so my translator and, main aide, I would call him, he turns and he just continues driving. But then as we're driving down the road, the guy turns back around, screeches his tires, comes off, and tries to run us off the road in Kramatorsk. Off like it was like we were going, I don't know if it was a bridge, but it was like an elevated area where we would go off the side of the road into a ditch. Like it was not safe. So we pull off to the side of the road. We park because we didn't feel like falling like 50 feet in a big vehicle. And so he comes off, parks right in front of us, and he's in a civilian car. This is not a military vehicle. This is a civilian vehicle. But I assumed that no one would be so bold as to do this without being I'm about to see the SBU come out and say, Dylan, you danced to a Russian song 5 years ago. You're going to, I don't know, like something. I have no clue what it's going to be. And it was going to be like, you read Dostoevsky, didn't you? No, it's something. But the guy comes out of the car, a big, like long beard, shaven head. He doesn't look happy. He's in the the pixel camouflage, and everyone knows. And he walks up to the side of the car, pulls out a pistol, cocks a gun, and threatens to execute me and my driver for endangering him while he was talking to his mother. Now, at the time, I was deeply confused, and I was confused because, like, your mom, like, what the fuck, his mother? Like, why is his mother in Kramatorsk? And the thing is, I don't speak good Ukrainian. I speak like a pigeon speak of Ukrainian, where I'm going to get like 1 out of every 6 words. And so if I'm lucky, I'll be like, I have a general idea what that sentence is. So I had an idea that he was angry about us interrupting his conversation with his mother. And eventually he uses the gun to threaten enough as my translator has his hands up. My hands aren't up because I'm more just baffled by the situation. I feel like I'm in a dream, so it's like it was hard for me to like react, and it didn't feel real because the whole situation felt so bizarre. And so he threatens my driver to get out of the car, and they both walk out into the dark. And he walks back after, I would say, maybe like 45 seconds, and those were not a good 45 seconds. He gets in the car, that car skids off, and he tells me that he was made to apologize to his mother. Now, what I did not know until the next day, because we were both tired, we went home, I had a show that night that I still had to do. And so I wake up the next day, and I didn't realize, I thought his mom was in the car. He was on his phone, chatting with his mom, driving in the middle of the night, and in Kramatorsk with no traffic lights, and then almost collides with us, gets angry, and then threatens to execute us. So that was one of the more crazy recent stories I would throw up there. But I mean, like, this war, it breaks people. Where you get to a point where you're acting recklessly because you've lost all sense of kind of like danger, because you've been near so much of it. It messes with your sense of it, and you don't react to danger in the way that you should. You're under immense pressure, and when you mobilize all of society in the way Ukraine has to, with it being 1/4 the size of Russia, that means you mobilize all of society. And Russia immediately, like a year into the war, went to the dregs. They went to the prisons, got the pedophiles, got the murderers, gave them guns. Not all of them are like that. I don't want to pointlessly demonize, but like, those people were allowed to join up. And so if you mobilize literally all of your society, and then keep them on the front for years on end, they're going to be put under pressure, and people break. We've seen it in our own wars, and it's true in this war as well. And I just hope that when he snaps, it's not going to get himself or anybody else killed.
Well, I'm a little pissed off now, because like I'm usually like at the party, people are like, Nick, tell us your craziest stories. Like, oh, I got a good one. I can't keep up with either of those. It's not, I got nothing. I'm gonna have to fucking private the show after this, because it's like, otherwise all my stories, I'm a writer, so people are like, oh, tell us a great story. Either that, I'm gonna private the show afterward. So in 1975, trust in mainstream media was at about 75%. 75% of people polled by Gallup said that they trusted mainstream media. 4%, it was 4% said they had no faith in it whatsoever. The all-time low was hit in 2016, and we have now hit that all-time low again with 29% saying that they trust the mainstream media a great deal or a fair amount, and 39% saying they do not trust it at all. Why? And this is for everybody.
Commander, would you like to go first, since you haven't really said a whole lot yet?
Sure. I mean, I'm not saying any of this as a streamer or somebody who did journalism studies or whatever in school. I'm just personal opinion here. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that increasingly we're seeing the news making less effort than ever to try to be unbiased and give both sides of the story. Doesn't matter which outlet it is, they're getting instructions for somewhere. My opinion, it's coming from the owners of what the message that should be projected is, and that's what we get. And as people start realizing this, they start realizing that you can't trust anything coming out of their mouths, because they're not telling you what actually happened. They're telling you what their boss wants you to think happened.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I gotta, like I told you when we talked one-on-one, I grew up in like an informational silo that's heavily right-wing. So like Fox News was like my source of media. So I had to undo a lot in my own journalism. But I feel like the mainstream news did not do a good job of differentiating their talk show points of their mainstream point, where they're like just they're just riffing like we are, versus their breaking news. Because I still find mainstream media breaking news, like when they come out with information, I still don't have a problem with it, depending on which source it is, if it's heavily right or left. But breaking news is usually fine if you understand that information changes. Right, information like you heard 5 minutes ago in a breaking news segment will change in the next 5 minutes, and if you're able to adapt to that as like a consumer of media, it should be fine. But a lot of people just are not. Well, you told me 5 minutes ago that Well, I mean, when I joined the military, I really learned that firsthand, because in the military, right, Commander, you're told something, and then 5 minutes later,
wait 5 minutes, there's a new story.
or the complete opposite, right? A frago comes in, and you got to do something completely different now.
Yeah.
But the sergeant told you, or your commander told, but it doesn't matter. New orders, and now that's what the orders are. So I like really kind of learned that. On how to like adapt to changing information. So I don't think that when it comes to like mainstream media's breaking news, it's really bad, but it's when it gets to their segments of talk show stuff that kind of atrophied. Like Americans didn't really get that, like, okay, we're breaking news and now we're like doing our analysis segments, and obviously those are heavily opinionated, right? Or like they're just analyzing what's happening. It could be that they have like an informed analysis, but oftentimes it's just kind of like, or they have like a contrarian on just to be a contrarian, or like, just like debate kind of format now.
See,
and I think when
I
people
agree with you, but the thing that becomes increasingly evident to me is like when I watch somebody doing an interview,
Mhm.
and the interviewee will respond to a question with something that is obvious BS,
Mhm.
and everybody knows it. And the interviewer doesn't call them on it, doesn't ask them to explain it. They just brush by it. And, you can almost see the little sign being waved behind the screen.
Mhm.
Don't challenge him on that.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing I see increasingly that bothers me.
Right. And like I would like Dylan's take on this, because I grew up in right-wing world, and in right-wing media, you don't push back on anything the right-wing media says, because it's the right-wing media positions itself as the non-mainstream. So, but it's also the most watched cable news networks, the most watched podcasts, all of it. Like the most right-wing attention is in their media, but they frame themselves as like the victim, basically, or like the little man,
or the outsiders. They're
the outsider.
They're the outside. They're the biggest network
Right.
there is, but they're the outsiders.
Right. So depending on where you're at, I mean, your information is like skewed that way. So like for me, I can see it now, because somebody that might not have consumed right-wing media like I did, you're mad that you're now the press is kind of like back down to Trump, whereas before they would challenge him and he would say like, oh, it's just fake news. And I think that's what it is though they went too far in the other direction, to where now they've weakened themselves, because now they're not really holding people accountable like they maybe tried to do when Trump was president the first time. And again, that's why I'd like to hear how Dylan thinks, and maybe again, Commander, of how that's changed. But his like fake news for everything, or like personally attacking journalists, threatening to jail journalists, and that does have an impact. But it's up to the journalist itself, and I think that's why independent media has risen, because I'm not afraid of. I don't have an editor that's going to fire me if I criticize Trump, right? Or somebody that's like over me if I say something negative to Trump, or I can say kind of what I want.
Forgive me for using the term, but you're not mainstream. And I think that's the key, is that
I'm saying that's why
mainstream news is answerable to powerful interests.
Right. For sure. And I agree. I think that's what Nick's question about kind of like how independent media is fit into it. I think that's why people like myself and Dylan and others with independent, non-mainstream nor corporate interest, why we've been able to rise up a little bit and have conversations that the mainstream news would normally have, or we can cover breaking news topics now, because of the lack of, now the media has kind of gone the other way, where they're not doing enough. They're not doing enough accountability. All right, now Dylan, and definitely Commander again, I'd like to hear.
And is Andering, I want to make sure he gets into.
Yeah, is Andering too.
Man, there's a lot to go here, because I want to. On one hand, I want to add on to this, but on another hand, I want to make sure I don't jump on the bandwagon. So I'm going to start by adding on to this, and then I'm going to defend mainstream media and attack alt media at the end of it. Okay, so I can anger as many people as physically possible. So
well done, sir.
Okay, so the first thing is, I think that nobody was truly prepared for the implications of the information age. Going from, you have a small selection of channels where you have to make a news broadcast that can appeal to the largest swaths of people, while trying to make sure that those of any political persuasion who might be watching your 30-minute breakdown of the news when your show is going to be broadcasting in the 60s and the 70s, because it was there was a select amount of channels, not as there was a certain time where people tuned into the news. It wasn't 24/7. Meant that they had to focus on getting the facts for that segment right. They need to focus on appealing to the most people, and they needed to focus on authenticity and reliability and trust. Trust became very valuable. When you remember back, it doesn't matter how liberal Edward R. Murrow actually was. When you think about the type of friends he hangs with, you won't talk to anybody in news who has a bad thing to say about CBS's Edward R. Murrow and the good work he did in Great Britain, the good work he did covering many of the conflicts the United States was in. Walter Cronkite. Well, there'll be some Vietnam vets. My grandfather was a Vietnam vet who might have some bad things to say about Walter Cronkite. But in most instances, the idea was these were figures of reliability and authenticity and of trust they were building to try to pitch to the as many Americans as possible. But when it became 24/7, and you had so many options, and you had to not just compete with maybe one other news channel and try to catch as many people in your net as possible, but you had to compete with the entirety of human creation at all times. You need to compete with all of YouTube. You need to compete with all of the articles online, all books, all music, all everything, because everything in the world you can pull out of the thing that's in your pocket. That is a radical transformation. It's a radical transformation to the amount of access that people have to making media, and it's a radical transformation to the amount of options that people have for consuming media. And on one hand, it's the problem and it's the fault of the media companies for not evolving to deal with that reality. On the other hand, I think it's also the fault of media consumers, of the people watching these shows, for immediately going to the avenues that are most comfortable to them, where people will reaffirm their worldviews, tell them what they want to hear, and they're not going to be hearing uncomfortable voices or facts and statistics that might be, like, for example, the fact that, like, talking about the unconstitutionality, about the power of the purse in Article 1 right now and what's happening in this country, that's an uncomfortable topic on some news channels, but is a very active topic on another, creates a reality divide that's not only bad for the trust in these institutions, but general trust throughout society, because we live in two different countries. We live in two different realities. And so I think that information age transformation has been extremely difficult for them to deal with. There's a bunch of other issues. A lot of news organizations are filled with pencil necks, and by being filled with pencil necks, it's going to be very difficult for them to connect with a lot of Americans and be able to understand, yes, it is true that the GDP number has gone up 2.5%, but what about credit card debt percentages? It's gone up these broad statistics, but what does that mean on the microeconomic factors? And I think sometimes that disconnect when you're living in sometimes not only a media bubble, but a social bubble, that leaks over and spills over into the news media, and that hurts a level of authenticity when they're trying to communicate with everyday people. The big issue I have right now with the news media, though, the one I'm most fearful of currently, is the bowing to power. When I saw ABC go through that $16 million settlement with Trump over what was a lawsuit that they were certain to win, that any legal expert who looks at it like, yeah, of course, Trump's just suing another media organization because they said something about him he doesn't like, and he has a record of suing Howard Stern for jokes about him that's offensive before he was even in politics, to now suing pollsters in Iowa because they released bad polls about him. But for a news organization of such credibility like ABC to bend the knee and pay out the $16 million, what's the signal? Do they just not want to be the first one to face Trump's wrath? Do they want to be able to still have access to the White House briefing room and to the Pentagon briefing room, as we're seeing the AP get boxed out because they wouldn't recognize the Gulf of America as Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico? Are we going to see a lot more bowing out as Donald Trump threatens the broadcast rights of these organizations? We're going to need to see a certain amount of bullishness from these media organizations when taking on power, not only in the way that we've described in interviews by saying, excuse me, Mr. Bob Menendez, but you need to answer about these Egyptian payments, or et cetera, whoever it is. But this is also true when it comes to threatening the media organizations' right to exist or how they can broadcast, because Trump will lay siege to these organizations for the next 4 years. He was open about this on the campaign trail, and we have seen nothing but that follow through since he's been put into office. And whether they cave or not scares me quite a lot, because You know, there's brave people in there, but there's also, you know, people who want to make money.
Well, it also used to be the New York Times that was the paper that would fight back. They were the ones, I think they were the defendants in the Pentagon Papers, and in releasing all of that information. Now, in the latest, you know, there's been protests against when what was it, Trump's golfing buddy who quote solved the Middle East problem when he came back. They said impeached Netanyahu and the New York Times, and they were calling for the New York Times because they didn't like the fact that the New York Times was not, and they've been doing more of it, but up until then had not really been calling what was going on in Palestine, in Palestinian areas, a genocide. So I just lost where I was. Oh yeah, so the New York Times is already capitulating, at least to ownership. And who's going to capitulate as in regards to the authority is probably an even worse question. I do want to get 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴 in here. 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴, did you have any thoughts? We've covered a lot, and we've already had a couple of hands, so you don't get any more hands.
Damn you. I think that we've been dealing with a confluence of events that have come together to kind of create this issue of media trust. The first one was obviously the rise of the internet and the instantaneous communication across the globe by just anybody to anybody. That allowed tribalism to flourish, because now you could find people that you wanted, your own echo chambers, anywhere across the internet. You didn't have to really integrate with your own community and, you know, deal with people of varying ideological persuasions, or, you know, it's like you didn't have to do that anymore. You could find your little tribe on the internet and they believe whatever you want to believe. So it's built up quite a lot of tribalism, especially in the more free countries where, you know, more ideas are expressed. And on top of that, you have the mainstream media, which seemed to turn more towards the we need to be able to make lots of money, finding it harder to compete because now anybody could go anywhere to get their information from any source, and them realizing that commentary sells. And so they need to be able to appeal to their strongest base that they can, that's actually watching, giving them views, etc. And so they've really turned into that to try and generate money, because it's been a difficult financial landscape for the mainstream media as well, especially print magazines, newspapers, etc. That's really fallen off. The rise of podcasting, etc. All this stuff has exacerbated the problem. And so now we're searching for, you know, tribes of people, and you've got to be able to keep a hold of those people. And so you're doubling down on your different commentaries towards different avenues and ideologies to appeal to them, which is pissing all the other tribes off. And so when you ask everybody collectively, hey, do you trust the media? Well, they're like, well, maybe my one, you know, OAN network, I like them, but everybody else is just, you know, they're the devil, they're fake news, whatever you want to call it. So they don't trust anybody else. And so now you've got all these different tribes who pretty much dislike most of the media because they're not pandering to their specific ideologies, their specific worldviews. And so I think all of these things kind of swirl together in the pot, and you end up with an overall statistic of people trusting mainstream media less and less and less. They have their very preferred purveyors of information and news that they like, and they pretty much distrust most everything else. And I'm not sure how you fix that.
And also, really quick to add, a little alley-oop from Dylan, because I think he forgot to grill alt media, but I got you, Dylan. But we also have gone another direction with alternative media, because like, while people like Dylan and myself exist, there's an abundance of alternative platforms now that are only engaging in misinformation and lies. And like, that's how they're just propagandists. They know they're getting money for it because it gives you the most engagement in anything, social media or in videos. So there also is like a problem now, I think, with alternate media that might, I don't know if I'm correct in the analysis yet, but it might even be worse than any criticism about the bad of the mainstream news, because it's like now it's like you're incentivized to lie, right? There's no editor holding you accountable. Maybe again, I could be wrong, but the
No,
way
I
I'm seeing
think
it,
the
go ahead.
difference is that people expect alt media to have its own agenda. They don't expect it necessarily. They're delighted when it happens to be impartial, unbiased, but I don't think they necessarily expect it in many cases. So
To be like, to be honest, or
yeah, I think people kind of, for the most part, expect whoever's talking to have a certain direction that they're going in. It's hard to separate individuals' personal belief structures from what they're going to say. And the difference, I think, is that many people expected, at least back in its heyday, that mass media, they had departments and lawyers and editors and everything who were all looking out for that to make sure that it was as impartial and unbiased as they could make it. And I think it's a combination of that's changed. And now that there are other sources available, you look for one that you feel is trustworthy, but you're at the same time perhaps semi-conscious in the back of your thinking that, yeah, maybe these guys aren't entirely as unbiased as I like, but at least they're saying things I want said.
true. Before Dylan, really quick, I guess for me, you got to understand, I'm always coming at it from right-wing media world. So I'm probably different than both of you, or all three of you, to be honest. So for me, right-wing media reinforces each other. Okay. It's like lore building, or they build each other and like use each other. They're characters in right-wing world. So they're always prominently shown, like Fox News, because that was the mainstream media I watched. They'd bring on a internet personality or whatever. And then also when you're living in that world, that is the information, right? You don't challenge the information because the mainstream liberal media is the problem. And you are a part, you're on the solution side. So anything that your side's saying is true. So it's not even, I guess, that deep. You're trying to weigh the options when you're in right-wing media world. It's like that is the option. Like when I'm just guy. It's going to sound cringe, and it's going to make Dylan cringe and his audience, and probably mine. But when I watched right-wing media, I thought I was getting the truth. Like when I would pull up a Tim Pool video, I thought he was like seriously researching something. And it's going to sound cringe, but the Burisma information and all that, I watched Tim Pool at that time. And I was watching him go on and all this garbage media now that I know is garbage media. But when I was watching him, or when I'm watching Alex Jones, I thought that they were giving legitimate information. I never once thought it was like, it's just like their skew on it, or like it's their narrative about it. Like when you're in that world, you genuinely believe that you are getting genuine information, and the liberal media is lying to you. But again, it's just a projection. And I know I'm going to be different probably than both of you, because both of you were probably more exposed to more media than I was. But I'm coming at it from the silo that I came up in. So that's the best way I can explain, I guess, how right-wing mainstream media works and the effects of it. Because a lot of it that we're seeing right now, and a lot of the lies and specific misinformation, yeah, you could say you could argue Hassan on Twitch or like other leftist streamers, but the mainstream media and the news and like the most watched podcast, cable news networks are right-wing, and they're just not doing nothing but lies at this point.
Dylan, did you have a comment or?
Yeah, I had a few comments. He said he's going to do the work on alt media for me, but this is therapy for me, so I still want to do it anyway.
I already knew you were.
I honestly think alt media, in some ways, has become a bigger problem than mainstream media. For example, one of my favorite things about alternative media is the fact that it's decentralized, and therefore it's much more difficult to just come, hey, here's all my money. I want you make all the alt media, like put my ads in there, promote my values, promote things. We're with a bigger centralized company versus a bunch of single individuals. It's much harder to convince like 50 people to jump on board than it is to maybe convince 2 or 3 organizations that have shareholders where technically their main incentive is profit, even though there might be made up of individuals with individual ideological beliefs. But the thing is, that's what I believed for a while, but that's probably hogwash, because we saw with Tenet Media, with the $10 million that the Russians funneled into alternative media in the United States. We saw with other programs that have been pumping up content creators like Steven Crowder and others that are just more traditional conservative big money. We saw Democrat big money getting involved this election. In fact, I've even because I'm open with my beliefs, and I believe people should be open with their biases. Like, I work with the Democratic Party, and they were offering me money, and I took some money working with organizations like that, and they're getting involved. And so for me, I look at all of this and I think, wow, that financial divide where big money is out and this is all authentic, that's gone. That's been gone for a long time. And while there might be individual content creators they can point to and say, oh, they're not getting told to think this or that way, or they'll take money from an organization and still have their authentic beliefs, because you can work with the Democrats, still have your beliefs, work with the Republicans, still have your beliefs. But the idea that they have the Raytheon ads, we have the people, a lot of that's bullshit. Excuse my friends. And even though that was something that was so appealing about alternative media, and it's something that still is appealing about it, but I think that it is dead for at least 50 to 60% of the big political content creators. Outside of that, fear-mongering for attention is how you win in the algorithm. It's always World War III, World War III, World War III. Every single time there's a political kerfuffle between new nation states. If an Indian stubs his toe near Pakistan, we're all about to die. That's how it works on Twitter.com. That's how it works on social media. And that's how it works with the people who are trying to prey upon the algorithm and people's natural fears in order to make money. Not only are they making money on misinforming people, I think they're making money on actively harming society by actively uninforming people. Because this is the thing. Sometimes when people see the type of damage that people like Tim Pool does when they spread disinformation, it's just like, oh, well, you just go in there and you send somebody and they give them all the right info. No, you got to go in there and you've got to break down the foundations of the nonsense they believe. Because as long as they believe Victoria Nuland chose the next president of Ukraine and overthrew the government with the CIA, and until you challenge that preconception that they've taken from Gray Zone, or they've taken from one of their favorite content creators, or they've taken from wherever, you're not going to be able to start building the foundation of, okay, so what is the Budapest Memorandum? You can't get to the Budapest Memorandum if you're stuck listening to Tulsi Gabbard talking about bioweapons. And so this fear-mongering is a real issue. No accountability, like Merck said. These people are accountable to themselves, and so when you getting millions of dollars from Russian dough, there's nobody to fire you. You fire yourself. And so while with a big media company, if Walter Cronkite took millions of dollars from the Russians, I think he would not have a job there anymore. Tim Pool continues to have his job. And there's also just a lot of low effort, whereas there is problems with big media organizations republishing things that are lies or not true. When it's just one pair of eyes or just two pair of eyes at a small organization, that's just less checks and balances, but there's just less checks on the information that is produced by them. And so while people talk about, oh, I don't want to go with the mainstream media because they lie all the time, I'm going to go listen to Tim Pool. I'm going to go listen to Elon Musk, who's constantly reposting misinformation. You can't, it's not you can't say you're citizen journalists just because you're reposting the stuff you found on Twitter on your platform. You're just reposting other regurgitated nonsense. That's not journalism. That's just low effort slop, but a lot of people call themselves journalists while doing that.
Also, too, without the editors or people directly holding them accountable, I've noticed that the other liars and propagandists will just help, but they have each other's back. So, well, you can call out Tim Pool for a lie. He'll have 18 other MAGA influencers retweeting Tim Pool, oh, Tim, he's so good and he's good to the MAGA movement, and they have each other's back. So and MAGA's populist. They go off of what's popular in their thing. So they're never going to hold each other accountable because they're going to have layers of those excuses.
Well, and he's clever too. He's got doesn't he have a round table? He's got other people with him and they all kind of disagree a little bit, but they mainly fundamentally agree with him. So he's actually got the echo chamber in the stream with him. as he's just got a head start on the.
I remember watching him bring on these because there's a lot of I don't know why we have this trend, and this is not. I understand we want to. Okay, I understand why we want to motivate young people, but every time I see like a new Democratic content creator, it's a 19-year-old kid from LA, and I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that's bad.
He's not wrong.
I'm just saying like let's have more 57-year-old farmers from like Timbuktu or whatever. Anyway,
or something. Or
we have a lot of these kids, but some of these kids are really really sharp, and I mean like I know Luke's really sharp. I know a lot of those guys are really sharp. Adam's super sharp. Adam Mockler's really sharp. I met him. I spoke to John with that dude. Great guy. And I saw one of these guys get invited on to Tim Pool's show. And it was him, Luke, Tim Pool, and 4 other people. 4 of 5 people to have this 19-year-old kid who's like, I like the canvas to come on his show and debate him. And I think this is how we have to set up conversation. Is this the only way we'll talk to other people because we're all bunkered down like we're all in Albania? We have so many bunkers and we just can't get out of it. It's sick. Is it really that difficult or dangerous to talk to other people? Or maybe if you're just full of hot air, it is because you'll pop.
I also see this strategy employed on Russian state media, right? Well, they'll have like Solovev will be talking, and then he has like 4 people around him that aren't challenging him at all, and they're like just basically how much can they agree with the thing? But it's also on Fox News.
To bring the other perspective, we've brought American Scott Ritter.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why, like when Tucker Carlson did what he did, it is so fucking dangerous. Excuse my friend, but it's just like Tucker Carlson going over there. He's in any media. He's a laughingstock. He's a laughingstock even at Fox, and he goes over there and gets his interview with Putin, and he's like, I'm my own independent individual, and Putin's a fine guy. Putin's literally murdered. He was an assassin with the KGB. Give me a fucking. Come
on, Nick. You don't like Moscow Cribs grocery store edition?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did, but then my children grew up and I didn't need anything to wipe their butts with anymore. So Damn. All right, we got $10. Godless Granny, Commander Lance. Any feel for how the military is reacting to banning transgender service members? That is a very good question. Do you have an answer for that?
I really have no feel for it. I haven't been on the base that much since the swearing in. I do know that one of the things that used to strike me when I go on base is that, and you have to take this within context, but I would see more interracial, more openly gay couples wandering around than you do in the outside world, in civilian world, if you will. Probably because they felt more comfortable since there were regulations in place that if they were harassed, would get those people slapped. So with change in policy being directed from above right now, how's that going to figure into it? I can't say. But honestly, I think that the military, because you come in contact with a much wider swath of the national plurality than people who, never leave more than a 25-mile distance from their house they were born in, or, whatever. I think people in the military tend to be a little more open-minded. So I think there would be a lot of dismay and that kind of stuff. I don't know. Transgender is always and always has been kind of one of those edge issues that doesn't resonate as well with some people. So I can't really comment on that specifically, but when you're talking the other kind of stuff, yeah, I think there's issues. And when you start thinking about the fact that another one of the messages that's coming down from on high is, women have no place in the military, or at least no place in the battlefield and all that crap. And yet we've had women serving in combat for, close to 20 years now. So there's a lot of people who've made careers in those fields and are now being said, no, you can't do that anymore. You need to go back to, being a secretary for some flag officer somewhere.
So I got you.
That going to be welcome. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So I served in the Army 10 years. I know, Commander, you know that, and many viewers. So the way I look at it and the way that a lot of service members look at it is readiness levels. And is this affecting readiness levels? Is this affecting lethality? And first, it was women. It was like having women serve in the infantry and the combat roles, and women have been doing that fine. No problem. There's no change in any readiness, anything. There's debates about like the PT test and how that goes, but like other than that, it's not affecting readiness. Same thing with trans individuals serving and anything. It's so minimal, like the amount of trans individuals serving, and it has not affected readiness. If it affected readiness or it affected the lethality of units, that would be a good faith debate. But other than that, I think it's like it started with women and then it moved, I think, to like trans people, which is like it's even less of a percentage of people serving, but that it hasn't changed the lethality at all. Just like women serving in combat roles haven't changed the lethality. It's actually improved it, I think. It's actually opened the door to more people, which in my opinion, it gives the United States military more access to more people that are willing to serve, because we only have 1% of the population that are going to do it, that are going to serve. People don't want to get ordered around and wear a uniform and go do drill and ceremony, and it's no one wants to do that, or most people don't want to do that. I shouldn't say most.
Arguably another element of that is that if you've got a woman who's trying to get into one of those combat roles and there's that social no, you don't belong here, and they still get in and they still succeed, that they're damn good to have gotten that far, and they're very motivated, as opposed to Bubba from South Dakota who just kind of wandered into the recruiting office one day.
Mm-hmm.
Or his friend drug him into the recruiting office and then left him there, and then he ended up going to, I've heard of that happening too.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Godless Granny. Hope that answers your question. So let me ask you this. How... I've seen Tim Pool on occasion, and he looks like he knows what he's talking about. If I didn't know, there's this thing that I happened to know before I started watching Tim Pool, and it's called fact. And when I started to watch Tim Pool, and I looked at the facts that I knew, I realized there was a problem somewhere betwixt the two. But he's got a good produced show. He's got all these other things. So how is a layman to tell between, somebody who is, ladies and gentlemen, Trump just actually turned left in front of the Rose Garden instead of right. We believe that signals World War III is imminent at any moment. We think you should hold your loved ones dear and never, ever, ever change the channel. How do we delineate from that and reality and or good independent journalism? This is for everybody. Just.
Well, I would.
Dylan, I already talked. You got it.
Yeah, I would start by prefacing by saying a lot of the right-wing stuff, when you really press them, will openly admit, no, we're not news. We're entertainment. And so everything has to be couched in adult ghost stories format to scare people, to keep them watching, keep them engaged. I think that's one of the big things. And the left, I think some people are now starting to do that too. So they're losing their credibility as well.
Xander, any thoughts?
Man, it's a lot of it is just when you listen to Tucker and the way that he, I think Tucker's a great example of this, because he is somebody who is just looking for whatever he can grab to paint whatever narrative he wants. If he finds a guy who says, yeah, I smoked crack with Obama and had gay sex with him, then he's going to give him a microphone and treat him like he's a serious individual, which is something he actually did on his program. And it's not me exaggerating. I saw, because I'm going to look at chat and be like, he would do. No, he did that.
I never heard that one.
He did that. He interviewed a guy who said he smoked crack and had gay homosexual sex with Obama when he was a senator in the back of a limousine. Now, he couldn't name what club they went to, what limousine they went to, who the driver was, or anything, but
I remember this vividly.
he looked very gay and crack smoking, so I think that's probably must be true or something. Either way, that's the level of journalistic respect that was the number one name in cable news up to a few years ago. And while it's very funny, it's also very dangerous, because that same man was reproducing on his mainstream news channel, on cable news, on Fox, number one name in cable news. He was saying the Jack Teixeira leak showed that for every Russian soldier that died, 5 Ukrainian soldiers died. And it was because he saw a reproduction of these that edited the numbers and literally flipped them and just ran with those. And he not only repeated that once on Fox, he repeated it a week later. So it's not as simple as this is the podcast, this is on TV, this has more filters, because if there's enough financial incentive or the ethics of the media organization is taken over by greed and profit, or wanting to be able to retain high-profile guests like Donald Trump so they won't be attacked by his supporters, and then his supporters will leave the network, as these news organizations become the fan clubs for sports teams, which is what's happening. This is dangerous. And I would first say is don't get your information from a sports team. If they're, and I'm not saying that they will never say something true, because I think sometimes when you're like, you're saying you can never get information if Fox News reports an exclude. No, what I'm saying is that do not take a sports team's statement at face value. If you saw the Chiefs come out with a statement saying, we just found out the game was rigged, actually we won, you would wait until maybe somebody else said something, because we can all understand their inherent bias. And I feel like once you're in the sports team, it's very easy to listen to the team captain with the pom-poms. And so I think it's very valuable for everyone to break out, either listen to the literal contradictory other side of the aisle and either their reports on it, or organizations that I think strive for independence very well. The Associated Press is an organization that I am very favorable of. I know a lot of journalists with the Associated Press. In Ukraine, really good people. You could go for organizations. Now, some people might attack me for this. Maybe I'm too much of a liberal. NPR, I think, generally speaking, has a higher standard for facts.
Yes.
C-SPAN is somewhere where you can probably get the original testimony from politicians instead of just being like, oh, AOC said that she wants to destroy America. You can go listen to what she said on the House floor. Now, this takes an amount of effort that is going to be inherently disincentivized. We already know, like, if you go to a website and you want to buy like a bag, the more clicks you have to click to buy the bag, the less people are going to buy the bag. The more effort you need to go off and do to research and figure out this information, the harder it's going to be. So I would say that if somebody shows their work, that's somebody to trust. If somebody just says this happened and then moves on, like, that's not saying they're not necessarily trustworthy. But if somebody shows their work, shows you where they got their sources, shows you where you can go and check it, that isn't necessarily a surefire way, but it definitely is something that is useful. When somebody says, from this page in this government report, from this direct source, or here's the footage of them saying it directly, and here's where you can go check the original source. I'm more willing to rely on people who are willing to show their work, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's why somebody like me, I have zero journalism school, no prior experience, and like I was just able to have success because I was live streaming, right? It was live, can't edit a live stream. I was showing everybody what was happening, and like that's firsthand information. I'm showing my work, like, or I'm not like, or I wasn't like filming myself saying, "Wow, look at all this stuff happening. There's so much happening around me. Wow, if only I would show you." Right? That would suck. People would be so mad because they want to see. They want to know what's happening. So I think that's why I was able to have success, and why I continue to, because my strategy is finding live feeds when I'm on YouTube. If I'm doing a YouTube feed from home, I'm finding live streams. Reuters is usually out there. AP is usually out there. If it's something of some event is happening, they have a still camera that's just live. No commentators, no news stuff, just a still live feed, and you can watch That's how we watched the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or the CCTV cameras that were up in Ukraine, and they had a feed going, and we were literally watching Russians enter the country. I didn't need CNN to tell me. I didn't need Fox News to tell me. I literally was on that YouTube CCTV link watching in Ukraine the Russians enter. So, and you have this, you can do this. I do it because I have a YouTube channel, but anybody can do this. Like you don't need a degree for this. You just have to be able to have the ability to want to. And now you can use ChatGPT like a magic conch and talk to it how you want to and be like, I need video from Ukraine or something. And then it'll give you like a bunch and you can find one or something. I don't know. It's very easy to do so. But yeah, like Dylan said, it's not a one-click thing. You know, you're not going to be able to get your information from memes. I'm sorry, you can make a meme after you're informed, but if you're only getting your information from memes, you are not informed. It's just impossible. I mean, maybe it can be, but I haven't seen it really. But also, yeah, for like sources, like Dylan said, AP for sure. Like I go to AP first. I mean, they've even highlighted my work in the past as whatever, so it's great. Reuters, Washington Post sometimes I would use, but more Reuters and AP first. Yeah, somebody that can provide on the ground information that's there in person is like probably the go-to. Somebody, that's why I even found Dylan to begin with, because someone was like, hey, Dylan Burns is on the ground in Ukraine right now doing journalism. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Follow. And then I got to interview him in Kyiv, and sure enough, he's a journalist. He's a journalist doing journalism in Ukraine. Wow. So he's probably a good source to go to for like firsthand information, right? Not like a commentator that's in LA or New York City that has never even been to Ukraine and knows anything about it, for example. So it's like, you just got to use your common sense a little bit. I know we don't really have that anymore, but it's just like first principle stuff. Like when we were in school, we had to show our work, right? In order to pass the test. Or like in math class, you had to show your work. You couldn't just be like, what is whatever equation and then write the answer. You had to show your work, right? And I sucked at that. And I suck at math and I still never could figure out how to do it. That's why I hated it, because I had to show my work. Like I just couldn't cheat or whatever. Just put the answer, look over the other kid's shoulder and write down what the real answer was. You had to write it out. That's just how it works.
I think that there's this problem of toxic defensiveness in alternative media. I think generally in media, but especially I think in places where it's more parasocial and easy to access people, where people turn their ideological values into themselves. It's who they are. It's how they present themselves online. It's how they present themselves online every day. They understand that their trust is their value. And so if they get something wrong, which let me just say, I've gotten things wrong. Merck has got, you know what, Merck, I'm going to take a swing at this and say you've gotten things wrong before too.
I said Kamala was going to win, so for sure.
Well, wrong. Then yeah, you swung and a miss. Yep, then, and I'm pretty sure everybody in this call has gotten things. Everybody's going to get things wrong, but a real test of the value of a commentator is how they behave when they get something wrong. If you're in chat and you say, "Hey, I know this is wrong," and they react by banning you, or they get like toxically defensive, or they are not willing to acknowledge when they get something like tremendously wrong. Like Tim Pool said that immediately once Trump got elected, the war would be over within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. That it would be negative 2 months before Trump got in power and the war would be over. He's never commented on that since. Somebody with I don't know, somebody that would have the ability to tug on their nuts a little and man up would come forward and say, look, I got it wrong. I got it wrong bad. I thought that just the threat of Trump itself would bring about peace. It was kind of silly. Maybe this is a little bit more complicated. A coward hides away from it and kind of forgets that they ever said it and just kind of moves on. And not only is that not good for like showing your credibility, it's also good for not evolving yourself as a content creator. Because if you don't sit down and acknowledge why you got stuff wrong, then you're going to get the same things wrong over and over and over and over again, which I'm seeing a lot when it comes to like the geopolitical conflicts, when people who I work with UCAN all the time, got stuff wrong, super bad at the start of the war, acknowledged somewhat that, okay, well, obviously they invaded, so I was wrong about that, but then didn't change at all their processes and how they were evaluating the war, and so they're falling into the same patterns. It's really sad. It's better to take it on the chin and admit it, and change for the better for an audience, for credibility, all around. And I think if you see content creators trying to do that, I think that could add to their credibility in my eyes.
But Dylan, Hassan told me that Russia would never invade.
Well, you know what? He gets more views than everyone in this room, so he must be right.
Well, if he's willing to hand over some of his viewers, I might be willing to say he's right. But I'm not going to just say it for free. Give me a break.
I forget to choose which viewers.
Yeah. Be careful.
Likes
it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. So, 2 more questions, and then I think we'll wrap it up. One question: it's now the age of Trump, which literally is. There's been the information age. There's been this is more than just the disinformation. It's the age of Trump. I mean, it's everything is different. Reality seems to not apply. The rule of law certainly doesn't apply. What is the biggest challenge for independent people who are starting out just now, or people who've been doing this for a little while and have now found that they have to talk people out there when Trump is doing the things that he's doing? What are we all facing if we're trying to give an independent take on what we see around us today?
I think in some ways we're incentivized not to, by the very nature of the algorithm and the space that has been cultivated in the bubbles. Because if you exist in one bubble, and let's say I'm a right winger, okay, let's say I'm a libertarian type, I'm somebody who wants low taxes, wants the government to leave me alone, everybody is, minds their own business, to each their own is my general principle. I might have a view of abortion, I don't like it or whatever, but I would right-leaning libertarian. And I hold all these values, and all of a sudden I see Trump comes up and he says he's going to implement a tariff on goods imported from Europe. And you run a manufacturing company, and you need components from, France in order to function. And you say, look, this is going to hurt my company. I know this is going to hurt. This is a tax not on these people, like you keep saying. It's going to be a tax on us who's importing these things. If you come out with that independent take where you're breaking with where the general bubble would be in the space, that could lead to a loss of followers, that could lead to a loss of income, that could lead to a loss of respect, that could lead to a loss of friends, that could lead to a loss of invites to shows. I know programs from perspectives that I've given that have not aligned perfectly within, let's say, the lefty worldview. That means I'm not going to get invited on those shows. And I know just by the nature of my perspective of somebody who's, not a Trumper and has been extremely critical of Trump, there's some programs that will never have me on ever to begin with. And that's just the nature of the space, and you have to accept those consequences if you want to be an independent voice saying anything worthwhile to say, because it's easy to join the chorus and to sing the same song everyone else is singing and go la-di-fucking-da the same way everybody else is doing. But that's boring. What's the reason you got into content creating? Is it just to create a check? If it's just to create a check, just to feed yourself, then sing la-di-da. If it was to make something, it was so that when you put your head down at the end and the same worms that eat you are going to eat me, and you're satisfied with your life, you say, I created something of value, I did something of value, and I spent my time worthwhile by contributing something. But if you're just repeating what everybody else is saying in order to, go along to get along, they're not contributing anything. You're just wasting air.
So I have I have two practical examples, one from past and one from current, just to kind of give it so it's easily understood. So it's almost kind of like a life algorithm too, right? So when I cover breaking news topics and something's happening and I put breaking in all caps, my channel grows by 300-400 subscribers in one stream every time. I am incentivized to find breaking news all the time.
You don't say.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I could put breaking on a stream, whatever it is, and I'd probably grow my channel every night, honestly, exponentially. So that is for sure. I know a lot of my chat when I'm covering fires in California, 3,000 viewers watching. When I'm just talking and riffing, maybe 500, 600, 700. I'm cool with it. I don't care. But when I'm just talking and riffing about how I feel, subscriber count goes down, lose subscribers. Well, we don't want to hear you. We just want to hear news boy. Give us put the fries in the bag, basically, you know. But that's just not how I am. Like, even when I supported Trump back, it sucks, but I did. I wasn't quiet about it. I had a MAGA hat. I posted on my Facebook about how I love Trump and all this cringe shit in 2015-16. So I was not going to change who I am at a core level. So yeah, it's in a sense, you get rewarded if you keep doing the one thing that works. But even if it, like, because I don't want to cover breaking news all the time. I don't want to cover fires. I don't want to cover chaos. I don't want to cover that. Like, it's mentally taxing, and also it can give the perception that I'm like an ambulance chaser, basically, and I don't want that either. I want to be able to have my independent thoughts and my independent way of doing things. I want to cover things myself. I love IRL journalism. I love covering things on the ground. I like doing what Dylan does way more than I like being here at home streaming. And I like doing streaming at home. I like being on the ground and talking to people and experiencing things and new cultures, and like all the senses are activated instead of just my eyes and my ears. I can smell things, I can touch things, I can talk to people. Like, it's just such a better experience. But also, like, when I told you guys I was former Trump supporter, MAGA, right? I cover the Black Lives Matter protests. I start understanding their purpose. I relay the purpose. I'm cooked because I am pushing against the MAGA narrative of like what protesting is, what the Black Lives Matter messaging actually was. I was like being out because like I was just out there. They were out there. We're out here because of police brutality. Okay. Hey, chat, they're out here because of police brutality. No, they're not. They're out there because Nancy Pelosi marched them out there personally. And I'm like, whoa. And like all of these crazy things. And I'm like, then I became a George Soros paid actor because I was just telling the truth about what was happening with like the protests. But I covered the riots. I never hid the riots part of it. But eventually they became marches, and they became like demonstrations, and they became speeches. And I covered all of it. And I'm like, I couldn't lie and be like, yep, guys, for sure, they're about to start burning things right after this. And then that doesn't happen or whatever. I would feel like an idiot. I don't know. That's just me. But like Dylan said, people these days don't really like that's been gone now. That like a more personal accountability or whatever that is, the ego or whatever, has been killed by a lot of things. So to wrap it up, obviously, like my whole background, my family, my friends, my social circle is all MAGA. They're all like conservative at the time. So when I started now pushing against like everything, basically, because I was just trying to tell the truth of what's happening, like Dylan said, I can't play softball in the Twin Cities anymore, basically, because they're all MAGA conservative and they hate me. And I'm posting about how shitty Trump is every day. So I'm like canceled there. All my friends, I only talked to like one or two of them that are still like MAGA. My family, we're just starting to repair that a little bit, but we can't talk about anything now for sure. Even though like my whole life I was aligned with them, right? My whole life I was aligned with them. I had a MAGA hat at a family gathering. I was doing it I feel like a hipster MAGA. I was MAGA before MAGA became cool, whatever, to these idiots. But anyways, I was doing all of that. I was doing all that shit. If you ever ask any of my personal friends, they know I was super conservative. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But when I started being involved personally and seeing what's actually happening and relaying that to people that are now following me, because I gained so many followers doing this, I felt like I had a responsibility. I gained 69,000 followers in one night because of the riots. I'm like, what is this now? Now I have like tens of thousands of people following me. They need to know what's happening. Okay, I got to do this journalism thing, I guess, but I don't want to lie. And it's kind of hard to lie when you're live streaming. Or, I mean, you can try. I've seen it in panels now. I know how people do it. But like when you're covering like things on the ground, it's really hard to like edit. You can't edit, or you can't try to frame something other than what it is. Like you're watching a live feed. I can comment on it. I can give commentary, but you as the viewer can mute me, or you can turn down the volume and still watch the live feed of what's happening. So I wasn't influenced by anything other than like myself, I guess, from what I was seeing. But I've lost a lot of opportunities in like my conservative past and friends and social circles that I can't go back to now, or they would reject me from being there because now I'm a liberal I guess that's all it took, was just to relay facts and evidence. Coming from the people that taught me that facts don't care about your feelings, we've now somehow became feelings are facts, and I don't like that, and I just could never exist within that.
Right. So for my last question, what I'm going to do is it's going to be for each person. I'm going to go counterclockwise. So it'll be Commander McMillan, 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐴, Dylan, and then Andrew. So, and I'll actually start with myself. The question is, what particular story do you think that's going on right now that either you're following in your shows or just following personally? Do you think is the most or one of the most important stories that you're following? For me, it's Hampton Dillinger, who was part of the Justice Department's Office of the Special Counsel. Cannot be fired, cannot be removed, has nonetheless been removed. A district court has reinstated him. Now they're taking this to the Supreme Court of the United States. The acting Solicitor General has asked SCOTUS to vacate the district court ruling, thereby kicking him out. The reason I think this is so important is SCOTUS handed huge amounts of power to the executive branch up through where we are now. And I'm not sure that they realize just how much power they ceded to Trump, who is ignoring congressional power and so far basically saying, I'm going to ignore any judge. If SCOTUS rules in favor of the executive in this case, it seems to me that there's absolutely no oversight either within the executive branch, any of the departments, or from the judicial branch that can have any impact on Trump. So while it's a reasonably small issue, I think this is the last chance for the Supreme Court to actually make an effort and say, no, there are lines and you're crossing them. And I don't know whether they're going to do that, but that's what I've been watching. Commander, what do you think is, what's piqued your interest? What are you keeping an eye on right now that you're most concerned about?
It's related to some extent to what you just said. And it's the fact that Trump and Musk have both said they don't care what the courts tell them. They're going to do what they want to anyway. This is reminiscent of Andrew Jackson basically saying, Supreme Court can make a ruling, let's see them enforce it. They don't have the power to. It's all predicated on the idea that we're all civilized gentlemen and we're going to, we're gentlewomen, but back then gentlemen, do what is appropriate and we're going to follow the rules. And I think one thing that's going to start becoming immediately and increasingly evident is the MAGAs and Trump have no intention whatsoever of following the rules. They are rewriting the rules. To go kind of back to what you were just asking earlier about, the era of Trump. Yeah, I think we are in the era of Trump because he's this great gravitational black hole. Everything is being sucked into his reality, whether we want it to or not. He's the event horizon. And until we find a way to plug that giant sucking hole, we're screwed.
All right. 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐴, how about you?
God, I wish I could be all original and everything. I'm following all of the calls for impeachment of judges because I want to see if they're going to follow through and actually try to start impeaching federal judges for the exact same reason. They're defying judicial branch rulings and saying, we're still going to do this anyway. Stop us. We don't care. You've been ideologically captured and you don't have this authority, yada, yada, yada. And it's incredibly dangerous because that just turns us into a nation under the rule of men, not under the rule of law. And as soon as you lose that, you don't have a nation. So I've been trying to follow up on all these threats to impeach these judges and trying to keep track of how many judicial decisions and orders the administration is just blatantly ignoring, and then sitting around wondering why in the well, you've already sworn. Why in the fuck isn't Congress putting on its big boy panties and saying, no, you can't have this power, and we will impeach you for trying to. I mean, there's a whole, it's like the other two branches are specifically there to offset one branch. So, and they're just not exercising their power. And that's the death of all of our constitutional republic. If they don't step up and actually do this, and what worries me is that they won't.
All right, Dylan.
I mean, there's a few Trump things that I could probably aim at. I'm really upset about all of these layoffs to all these very experienced civil servants. I grew up in the DC area, I grew up in Maryland, so a lot of these people are my neighbors. A lot of these people are my community members. Both of my grandparents who raised me were federal employees. One worked as a machinist for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The other worked as a cook for the federal government. So I grew up around civil service. I grew up around public employees, and to see so many people be put under scrutiny by those with very little experience to zero experience in the fields that they have been given lordship over, and to have these young 19 to 24-year-olds interrogating 30, 40-year veterans of civil servants, asking them to justify themselves to these high school and college grads with no experience in the field, but they do have experience in volunteering or interning for Elon Musk, is incredibly infuriating. Not only because this is like bleeding experience for our country, as these are like years that take time to rebuild. If you just replace them with some like lower cost, like replacement, like somebody who has 40 years experience in the IRS is going to know a lot more about tax cheats than somebody who they just like swept off the corner or just took straight out of college. And these people that are getting fired, this is the thing that really angers me. They could have worked in the private sector. They could have said, screw this, I don't want to work as a civil servant, I don't want to work as a public official, I'm going to go work for General Electronics, I'm going to go work for DuPont Chemical, I'm going to go work for Raytheon, or I'm going to go work for any of these other big companies that'd be more than willing to pay me sometimes 50% more than double than what I'm going to get with the federal government, which means a nicer car, a nicer house, more food on the plate of my children. But I've instead chosen to try to guard the flame of the republic and try to improve my country for something that can pass my life on this earth to my children. And we've looked at those people and we spat in their fucking face. And that really infuriates me. And I also need to just give a mandatory mention to the human safari, which is still going on in Kherson, the constant hunting of civilians that I have documented, that my friends have documented, that many mainstream publications have documented. And every time I check in on it, there's every week the Russians kill babushkas with drones, seemingly on purpose. And I do believe that people should Google the human safari in Kherson. I'll be releasing a documentary on it in the next month or two.
Let me know when you release that, because we would be interested in, at a minimum, putting that on our Discord. So I'll know. I'm going to be subscribed to you anyway. I'll know when you release it. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, still covering honestly the same story I have been for the past 4 years, which is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Less so, more of like a mainline thing I'm covering now. And it just when news comes out, I cover it during the daytime. But every Saturday, we cover just a Ukraine update only, like with the latest numbers, map breakdown, some drone videos or whatever that's coming out, because of the misinformation says, oh, we don't know what's happening in Ukraine. There's no videos ever, and it was just, that's why I show some of them, especially like Kraken or 𝐒𝐨 videos or anything on YouTube that's posted is good. So we review some of that. I apply some of my military experience to the analysis if I can, if it's possible. So that's like, that's not going to stop. But also like something that I started covering during Ukraine, and I'm just going to be honest, I know it pushed so many people away when I started covering MAGA back in like the end of 2022, 2023, because I just thought I was being an honest Ukraine supporter, right? Covering the American politics of it because bills had to pass. to get aid to Ukraine. But I was also involved in the process through the Ukraine Action Summit. So I got to hang out with Dylan both in Ukraine and in Washington, D.C. To advocate for the bills and go there and meet politicians face to face and their aides and try to get aid through. And that's been such an amazing process. And I'm going to continue to do that. But I know I pushed a lot of people away from the channel because it could be divisive, I guess. But I guess I've been covering everything that we're seeing right now in America. But since like 2022, when the writing was on the wall, when Speaker McCarthy got ousted for supporting aid to Ukraine, and we got Mike Johnson, when the Republicans stalled aid to Ukraine for 6 months, I might have sounded crazy at the time because I was like, the only people against aid to Ukraine were Republicans. Not all of them, but that was it. Like MAGA Republicans were like vehemently against aid to Ukraine, like platforming Russian propaganda on their social media or regurgitating it outright. Joe Rogan, no pushback. All of the right
Mark,
media.
do you remember when Rashida Tlaib and the rest of them sent out that letter, and within a week, they had all retracted it on negotiating with Russia? The Democrats like literally clamped down on it. They said, we're not playing these games immediately. Is there any equivalent on the other side, Mark?
None, not at all. Like, if anything, there was excuses made and goalpost moving and like, oh, well, Trump could be good for Ukraine, at the time. And I was just, and I get it. I know so many people were tuning into my Ukraine updates every day, and I was injecting American domestic politics into it. And I know I'm not sorry either. I'm really not sorry at all, because I felt I wanted victory for Ukraine and telling the truth about what the politicians were doing on the back end, because as much as I care, they're the ones that make the decisions and like the things that move on a grander scale than I can. I can fundraise for drones. I can fundraise for trucks. I can do all, but I can't make giant state level decisions on behalf of the United States. So we had to get that there. So I was just being honest about it. Everything Dylan mentioned right now about federal workers was written in Project 2025. I covered that. I read it. I spent 4 hours reading like the first 2 chapters of Project 2025. The federal workforce removal is in the first section. It's there. It was written. I know I get it. It's cringe because, it's fake. Democrats wrote it. Trump says he doesn't know anything about it. We're living it. Right. And I reported it then. So I'm really just kind of covering that still. Shout out. And I'm going to actually probably be returning to form on how I started Mercado Media, because 50501 protests and the movement is really picking up steam. And I covered the very first one in their genesis a couple of weeks ago. And I honestly thought like 30 people. And I started covering protests. So this is the thing. I'm good at it. Like, I'm very good at this type of stuff. So I was excited to get back and do stuff I started with. Now I'm covering protests in the Twin Cities again. All right, get to do it. But there were like hundreds of people. Like, and it's February in Minnesota. It's like -26 outside Fahrenheit, which is like negative 32 or something in non-freedom numbers or whatever. But it's extremely cold. Like we have extreme weather, and that's no argument. It's not like a inconvenience of cold. No, it is. You can get a cold weather injury type cold, and there are hundreds of people going, and not just in Minnesota, but they're all around the country. And I think it's going to be a very effective way to push back from like a grassroots people effort, because while we can support the politicians and the Democratic Party efforts, whatever that looks like, it's really going to be from a populism from people, I think, that's going to have like actually push back against Donald Trump, more so than relying on Chuck Schumer. I have optimism for like Hakeem Jeffries, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, Moskowitz. There's plenty of great voices there, but it's really going to have to come from a movement of populism from people, kind of like like a liberal Tea Party type thing, or I don't know what you would call it. But I think this 50501 movement is really going to encapsulate that, and I am going to be covering it personally as it continues, because it's only going to grow in numbers as it gets warmer. We aren't even a month into his presidency, and we're already seeing people interested in protesting. And that didn't happen until like the end of 2020, when he was already on his way out. And it showed like 81 million people voted for Joe Biden. And because all of 2020, I really think all that activism and engagement, and I know it was for Black Lives Matter for sure, but like it kept people involved. These last 4 years, I think a lot of people were able to just kind of like tune out from it all because of Trump was a nightmare and the ending of his presidency was a nightmare. But now, like, it's in our face every day. Like, they're doing it without any type of remorse, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and it's really upsetting normal people. Like, there's people that never protested, or like that usually are mad, but they don't get active. Time to turn the TV off. Get out there. And I'll be covering it.
All right. Well, so first of all, to our audience, thank you very much for the super chats and the contributions. We do get demonetized a lot. I suspect these gentlemen get demonetized about as often as we do too. So it really is a huge help. I'd also like to very strongly recommend that if you're not subscribed to either of these two gentlemen, that you subscribe to both. I don't say that for every guest we have on. I do like every guest we have on. For the most part, I pick people that we like, but these are definitely gentlemen that are worth watching. I suspect most of our audience has already joined them. We will be following all of our regular news on the Discord. So if you want to join the breaking news and or these topics, Ukraine, Trump, all of the legal matters, come on in, discuss it with us if you want. We're actually kind of a community-run channel, so how and when we go to breaking is as often as not determined by the people in the Discord who are contributing to the news. We're crowdsourced in that sense. So thank you to all of our mods, the audience. I would like to thank Andrew Mercado, Dylan Burns, 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐼, and of course Commander Lance McMillan for joining us today. Gentlemen, we hope we get a chance to see you all real soon, and we look forward to seeing the rest of your work. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Have a good night all.
All right, take care.